Now, with 2 days of a slight decline in the number of deaths, the death toll of Italy witnessed a spike yet again. Italy has reported 743 new deaths in the last 24 hours. The Italian government has imposed tougher restrictions as the country struggles with an increasing death toll. In the last 2 days, Italy showed signs of a considerable decline in deaths, with 601 cases reported on Monday. The sudden leap in death toll is a cause for concern for many. Now, although the death toll rose to a new high, the country saw a considerable decline in the newly reported infected cases. The rate of officially registered new infections was just 8%. The Interior and Health Ministries issued a joint ordinance banning all domestic travel as the coronavirus pandemic continued to advance in the country. Similarly, France has seen a big leap in the number of deaths due to COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, with 240 deaths. The total death toll in France now stands at 1,100. French Public Health Chief Jérôme Solomon has told reporters that around 22,300 people had tested positive for the virus in France, with a total of 10,000 hospitalized and with more than 2,500 people confined in intensive care units.
Enfin, en termes de décès hospitaliers, donc recensés à l'hôpital, nous avons ce soir 1100 décès observés en milieu hospitalier. 85% de ces décès surviennent chez des personnes de plus de 70 ans. Nous sommes donc face à une épidémie de Covid-19 inédite, sévère et rapide.
In Germany, both German and Italian patients suffering from COVID-19 are now being treated in 3 federal states. This noble initiative came a day after the nationwide contact ban came into effect in Germany. The North Rhine-Westphalia will be treating 10 COVID-19 patients from Italy. The move, announced by Governor Armin Laschet, follows a decision by Germany's eastern state Saxony to treat 8 patients from Italy. Now, 3 German states bordering France have also begun taking in French patients in small numbers. On the other hand, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has imposed strict measures to curb the spread of the virus, including a 3-week lockdown in the country. On public gatherings of more than 2 people, police and local authorities will have the power to fine people violating the restrictions. Now, the restrictions would be under constant review, and relaxation of the imposed laws would be considered after 3 weeks of lockdown. The country has more than 330 deaths, with around 6,600 infected cases. So how do the people of the UK feel about the new measures to contain the coronavirus spread? Our London Bureau Chief, Mandy Clark, has more insight on this.
So what will these new measures mean for Britain? Well, right now there's around 7,000 cases in the country and over 330 deaths have already taken place. It really puts Britain on the same track as Italy. We're around 2 weeks behind. What Britain doesn't want is the numbers of deaths that we are seeing in Italy. So they're hoping these new measures will really flatten the curve, slow down the spread of the virus. They're also calling on retired NHS staff to come out of retirement and join the frontline healthcare workers. They're encouraging students to finish med school early to get into the healthcare system. So they are doing what they can. But the real question is, will these new measures restrict people enough and slow down the virus? And that is just going to be a situation where we'll have to wait and see if Britain won't see the same numbers as Italy. Mandy Clark, World is One, WION, London.
Now, to give us more insight on what is happening in Europe right now, we are joined by Lucy Hugh from Brussels. Good afternoon to you, Lucy. Now, with 2 days of a slight decline in the number of deaths, the death toll has yet again spiked in Italy with 743 new deaths last night. This is a huge cause for concern.
It is, yes, and as you were saying, you know, a figure of 743 is clearly a really significant number. We were looking at nearly 800 deaths on Saturday, which set a global record, surpassing that of even China, which, you know, of course, China and Italy are the worst affected countries by the coronavirus pandemic. That had fallen to 601 on Monday, so there were some hopes that Italy was now starting to see the peak of cases and that there now would be a steady decline. But Significantly, the rate of new infection does still appear to be slowing. There has been a continued successive 2-day decrease in that number of new infections. Clearly, the very strict quarantine measures are continuing in Italy. They have now been stepped up as well, with the closure of industry and factories around the country. And in that worst affected northern Lombardy region, people are now banned from exiting their houses altogether, even to take exercises. So it is sort of replicating the very, very strict lockdown measures we saw in China. We were told that a specialist team from China was sent to Italy to check up on the way that those lockdown measures were being imposed, and that they'd given Italian authorities some guidance, and that banning people from taking exercise outdoors was one of those measures to really stop the spread of the virus further. So clearly, for Italian health officials, this is worrying. There was some talk yesterday that perhaps there was some light at the end of the tunnel, with again a second successive fall in the death toll. But of course, Italian authorities will be monitoring those figures very closely, but clearly there will have to be some extension to the lockdown measures that were imposed around a fortnight ago.
Lucy, we seem to be witnessing the same trend in France, with the trajectory of the number of cases increasing as well as deaths. What is the latest there?
Yes, the figure there now in excess of 22,000, and as you're saying, another increase in the death toll. Much of the country now, of course, has been affected by this. It began in the northern region of Paris, an area called WION, and we are hearing, of course, hospitals in and around that worst affected area are inundated with very sick people demanding specialist care, to the extent that now bordering countries such as Germany and Austria are now Germany and Switzerland are now helping France with those medical efforts, with sick patients being transferred across borders to receive that specialist care. So a worsening situation, and a warning from French authorities that the lockdown measures, again, will be extended at least they're talking now about 6 weeks from the date that the lockdown measures were imposed, just to make sure that they can start to take some effect. At the moment, people are allowed to go out for exercise once a day, but other than that, only for essential travel, whether it's to go and get food from the supermarket, to go to the bank. But people are banned from going to see elderly relatives in nursing homes, for example. And if you're caught on the street, you can face a fine of €130 if you don't have good reasons. So those measures likely now to be extended from 6 weeks from the date that they were imposed, as that death toll continues to rise and the number of cases, really starting to increase.
I want to focus now on the UK. We know Prime Minister Boris Johnson has imposed stricter measures, but a point that you made earlier about Italy restricting its citizens to no exercise during the day, that seems to still be happening in the UK. People are allowed out of their homes to exercise for about an hour a day. How are these measures going to be enforced in the UK, and are they strict enough?
Yes, certainly there has been lots of debate about this in the last 24 hours. Confusion from people about, what we've been told that key workers, things like nurses, doctors, teachers, are allowed to travel to work if they're doing essential work that is impossible to do from home. But because of the sort of haziness in the language that's being used, there is some confusion. Some employers are demanding that their employees come into work, saying that their work is essential. So we're seeing images of packed public transport, full tubes at rush hour, as is what would be the case in normal times. Similarly, people in parks having picnics, treating this as a bit of a holiday. So there has been some criticism that the messaging from the government hasn't been clear enough on this, that people are bending the rules, that, that hour's exercise, there is not much enforcement of that, what constitutes an hour's exercise. So it may be, Boris Johnson has said that the police will be deployed to enforce these rules, but certainly it seems that if it's as less strict and clear, as is the case in other European countries like France, where people face a fine if they're caught outside. We know that nearly 50,000 people have been charged in Italy with, breaching the lockdown measures that have been imposed there. So it may be that the UK government will be forced to take more strict measures and to really crack down using legal measures to enforce this if this confusion continues.
Thanks very much for that report. That is WION's correspondent Lucy Hugh, bringing us the latest on the coronavirus pandemic in Europe.